But I'm glad
Good
you
morning.
guys are like more transparent than me, so that's good. That's a good sign.
Yeah, it gets there. Good morning. Welcome to the Light on Suitability podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Comeau. I am with my co-host, Joe Haytas, and our special guest returning, thank goodness, um, my former client and successful parolee now, Mr. Gawlik, whatever you want to say, doesn't matter. Mike.
Mike's fine.
And we're back. We were just actually, I don't know, kind of working step 5, being transparent about our personality flaws, I guess, things that we struggle with, and just kind of joking around. But we are moving to strategy 10 as promised. We've already been working our way through strategies 1 through 9 of Joe's book, 36 Strategies of Suitability. And I'm going to just for Mike's benefit, go through kind of an overview, do what I usually do, then turn it over to Joe for his perspectives on, what he was thinking about the chapter and that sort of thing. You know what I did? I took your book chapter, Joe, and I put it into the structured decision-making framework.
Mm-hmm.
But we can unpack it however, whatever direction we want. And I didn't do static factors. I just did the dynamic factors, programming, institutional behavior, and offender change.
Yeah.
And then I put what you said, become the better you. Those who cannot change their mind cannot change anything. George Bernard Shaw. That's Joe's opener for the book. He talks about self-improvement right up front. He defines self-improvement as improvement of one's mind, character, conduct, behavior, ethics, etc. through one's own efforts. I think it's perfect. I think it's perfect. I'm a self-improvement junkie. Decades and decades later, I'm still extremely flawed, and my ego rules supreme on most days. But I do try. In terms of the structured decision-making framework, like I said, we have programming. How does that apply to Joe's book? How does it apply to your loved one if they're trying to get parole? Well, if you need to be open to change, open to changing your mind about the way you think. How are you going to go about that in prison? You're going to have to go to some classes and some programs and read books and do correspondence courses. And you're just going to have to get past that initial hurdle, especially for my male clients, because women, we tend to just lap up self-improvement. We're good with it. We're more empathetic. We're more about feelings. We want to talk about our feelings. And a lot of my male clients struggle with talking about feelings. They struggle to talk to other people about their feelings. Extremely difficult skill for most men. So I thought Joe's, he's got several kind of bullet points in the chapter. You've got to be open to change. So I put that under the programming category. And again, a willingness to participate. So immersing yourself in self-help is going to get you, where does he say? To become the better you. And then institutional behavior, that category institutional behavior is another category of structured decision-making framework. And then Joe's chapter, the relevant chapters that I thought about there is stop making excuses, which is his bullet point number 2. Okay. So if you are going to show that you have improved your institutional behavior, you need to start being accountable for your actions, taking a proactive approach to resolving conflicts, and just simply follow the rules, right, Mike? Follow the rules. And then
Absolutely.
That will
Absolutely.
actually be a way to show the panel, there's like, you can tell them theoretically, but if you show them by example, it's like, I actually put this into practice so that I wasn't triggered on this day to use the phone, to use the drugs, to get in the fight, to argue with my cellmate, to whatever, go to the officer and tell them my cellmate's using drugs and I'd like to get out of there, por favor, right? And
Absolutely.
offender change, I thought again was relevant to be open to change. Deal with rejection positively. Our egos do not like to deal with rejection, and rejection's a huge thing, right? It's just being criticized. It's being, maybe someone says something that's just an objective fact and you take it personally. Again, immersing yourself in self-help is one of his bullet points there. And the offender change, also be honest and direct. A lot of people that we represent have and or will be diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. They are, I don't like this word sociopaths, but that's the other way of saying antisocial personality disorder. So you've got to be able to show that you are not that same guy. So that's definitely under offender change. And then he also talks about in the book, be who you are today. I'd like him to kind of elaborate on that one for me when I turn this over to him. And the release plans. He's got this, one of the things he's got is, the program, stop making excuses. I think I missed that one, but again, antisocial personality disorder, lots of excuses. So that could go under offender change. And the release plans obviously are just using what you learn in programming to develop those relapse prevention plans, obviously is imperative. So I don't know if my summary makes any sense, but what do you think about that in terms of the structured decision-making framework, Joe? Since the writing of this book, we kind of switched from Title 15 factors, although they're still relevant, to structured decision-making frameworks. And then I'd like you to talk about anything you want to talk about, but in particular, this number 5, be who you are today. What were you driving at there?
Sure, there's a lot to unpack there. Be who you are today means it kind of goes towards the concept of, like when someone, and this is just an example, when someone gives their life over to the Lord, God or Jesus will accept them where they're at, so it's important, most of our lives, maybe we try to be somebody we're not because we're so wrapped up in what people think about us, et cetera, et cetera. And, be who you are. It means being your authentic self. We can't be somebody who we're not, even with all of our flaws and our warts and everything, we got to be who we are. And part of being who we are is realizing where we've been and where we want to be, but today in the moment, we can only be who we are and we can only do so much, like you didn't get to this point in one day and you're not going to get away from it in one day. It's a process, but to be your authentic self and realize the change that you require and to accept yourself where you're at today and keep working towards a better you. Okay. And then you wanted, the next question was, of your compound question was about the structured decision-making framework and how it relates to the book. Well, the book was written before the structured decision-making framework became a way of analyzing somebody to come up with a decision. Now, it's interesting that the structured decision-making framework is not codified in any law. Is it? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's just a tool they use to kind of organize their thoughts and their areas in, specifically, so they can be concise and consistent with their decisions. That's why it's called the structured decision-making framework. It's a framework, it's a concept. It's not in law. They're just trying to determine offender change and how the person got there. And of course, where they were before with the static factors, the criminal history and impulse control at the time of the crime. And then it goes to the dynamic factors, things we can change. Well, I think all of those, whether it's offender change, discipline history, programming, release plans, they're all covered in the book, but they're just not organized under the structured decision-making framework. So you got to kind of pick them out, piecemeal. But it's all, it's all part of the mix. And then,
for sure.
What else were you,
sure.
were you saying? Well, you know what? Here, regardless of that, Elizabeth.
Whatever you and I said, number 1, number 2, and then number 3, whatever it is that you were thinking about.
Sure. All of these concepts in strategy 10 to become the better you, I believe, is all about the offender change, and some of it is personal, like stop making excuses. And I'm not just pointing my finger at prisoners. I mean, all of us make excuses at one time or another, probably more often than not, of why this happened and why that didn't happen. But the thing is to try to, be as real as you can and be as honest and truthful about yourself, whether it was in the past or whether it's today. So, because if you make excuses, then you're not identifying a problem. And if you don't identify a problem, then you're not going to change. You're not going to improve on whatever it is that you're making excuses for. And then also, deal with rejection positively. That's a very difficult thing for anybody. But again, if you can take rejection and, the Q-tip thing, quit taking it personal, number 1. And number 2, ask yourself, what can I learn from this? If it's a negative situation. I even have difficulty with that myself. Like, there's a certain commissioner who stops us during our follow-up questioning and say, counsel, that's already been asked, or counsel, that's not relevant. So, I'm, I have to be honest and direct with myself and just move on and don't let that, distract me from my job. But, and then be who you are today. You're evolving as a human being. And so you can only be who you are today. I know they say fake it till you make it. And, maybe that's okay. But the thing is to be genuine and to be honest with yourself. And then becoming immersed in self-help. Yeah, because you're trying to change. And, there's revolution and there's evolution. And we all want immediate gratification usually, but it takes time. And programming change evolves, but it's a willingness to sit down and to learn those concepts. The faster you learn them and apply them to yourself, the faster you're going to get to the gate. But sometimes life, whatever you want to call it, life, politics, jobs, making 10 cents an hour, whatever, even that stuff gets in the way. So everybody has has the burden they're carrying. But, you know, you got to keep your eye on the prize to make yourself a better person in a bad environment, and to try to keep moving forward every day, you know, but be who you are, but you can't be somebody you're not. And
Joe,
that's,
That's absolutely right.
it's so great. And I just wanted to highlight a couple things that I thought was, this chapter is really packed full of stuff. And then I want Mike to chime in. But some of the stuff you talked about in Be Who You Are Today, okay, is just saying also just be gentle with yourself. You're just starting out. Don't, you know, you're going to make mistakes along the way. You're going to have times when you just keep acting in the same old crappy way. You had a lot of really good questions here too. Can you talk about your strengths and weaknesses with confidence? In other words, do you know who you really are? Are you always the same in how you act, regardless of the situation you're in? When has anyone ever told you they thought you were one way, but then when they got to know you better, realized you were another way? Has anyone ever commented on how you act differently around various people? Do you ever act like you don't care what other thinks, but deep down it really stings when others judge or reject you? And that's just a matter of, you know, you've got to flush that out and start thinking confidently. Do you ever, what might some of your masks might be? You talked about being a victim and the masks there. And I thought, those were really good questions. You've got a whole bunch of other stuff in this chapter as well. You've got triggers, talking about triggers, and they immersed in the self-help. You've got internalization, which we have gone to, and things like that. And actually, this book is just chock full of stuff like that. So, Mike, what kind of things come up for you in terms of anything I brought up, anything Joe brought up, and anything that you thought of while you were listening in?
Well, we're going to start with immersing yourself in self-help. I don't know how many times over the years I've heard, well, they don't offer that here. I don't have access to that. We don't have any programs. Quit making excuses. That's the bottom line. If you want to do a program, they're available. A lot of the chapels at whatever prison you're at has access to them. There are a lot of self-help available. All you have to do is write on them. And here's the newest great thing that the CDCR has made available is the Adobo platform. There is so much self-help on that. I mean, from the time that they introduced that, it was about a year before I went back to board. And in that year, I logged, I want to say it was about 850 hours.
wow.
Doing self-help programs. And they have
I would say
everything that you can
qualifies
imagine.
as immersion.
I would say so.
Right.
But, you know, we have a choice. We can sit there with this stupid little device and watch movies and listen to music and play games all day long and send emails. But at the end of the day, what's that going to get you? Open up that Adobo app, access everything in there. I mean, they have everything from anger management to addiction to self-confidence, self-esteem, you name it, they have something in there for you. The 12 steps is covered 9 different ways. One of the best ones was by this Catholic priest that really wanted to get that message out there. And I wish I could remember his name for the life of me, but I mean, it was great. I turned it on a whim just to see what he had to talk about. And before you knew it, I was already 4 steps in and they were calling count time.
Wow. Ooh.
And, you know, some of the stuff's really good. Some of the stuff is there to help. And especially for the people in the restrictive housing units, you can also use that self-help that's on there to reduce your amount of time in the RHU, get you back out onto the yard where you have access to more programs. I mean, yeah, we may not have a lot physically going on the yards because of budgeting, because of space, because of whatever the reason. But it's up to us to find the programs we need. I mean, they call themselves the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, and it's great that they're starting some rehabilitation services for us. But let's face it, there would be no rehabilitation in the prisons if it wasn't for the population showing an interest and putting the effort forth to start these things.
Yeah.
I mean, there wasn't a gambling addiction treatment program of any sorts on my yard, and the board wanted me to do Gamblers Anonymous. Well, I've been proactive long before that and started getting in contact with them. So what did I do? I started one on the yard. I got the materials, I made it available to everybody, and we did it. That's all it takes is a little bit of drive, a little bit of ambition. I mean, what are you going to lose? A pinochle game? Are you going to lose half an hour of TV? It's not that big of a deal when you look at it at what you're giving up. Because I would rather give up that pinochle game, that TV show, that time kicking it with the homeboys. Really? What's that going to do for you in the long run? Use that. Start these groups if you have to. If they're on the yard, take advantage of them. Go to Adobo and go to your chapel. All the prep courses should be available in almost every chapel within the state of California. And prep has some really good courses. And I think the thing that scares people with prep is it's a lot of writing. Here's a secret I've learned, guys. When you have to sit down and honestly write things down, it becomes a lot harder to lie to yourself. Because, you know, writing something down on paper gives it life, gives it meaning, gives it substance. And I found when I was doing the prep courses early on and I started writing and I wasn't being true to myself, true to my past, true to my change, the words didn't flow. I crumpled up 5 or 6 pieces of paper. And then when I started pulling my head out and doing the right thing and doing it the way it was meant to be done, being honest, it flowed. And I think that's a big fear for a lot of people is because the insight that we gain into this when we do self-help is often painful and it's often traumatizing. But we have to remember, we have to go through that pain to change. And that trauma, well, that's trauma from our past. We've already lived that. All we're doing now is re-experiencing it so we can face it. You know, saying I don't have programs available, I don't, you know, it takes too much time. It's all excuses. And the board doesn't want to hear excuses.
Mm-mm.
But here's the big thing. When you stand up in front of judgment of whatever your faith is, and your creator's looking down at you saying, hey, you know, you did all this negative stuff in life. What did you do to change yourself? What are you going to say? Oh, I decided I would rather play pinochle. You know, he gave us free will for a reason. You know, it's time to start exercising that. Which leads to the second part of this. A big part of the reason that I think it's hard for men in the prison system to be their authentic self is a lot of us have lost who we were along the way. So a lot of us become criminals, and those who become gang members do so a lot of times because they're not getting the acceptance and the love and attention that they felt they needed. So we become social chameleons. We find a group, we fit in with it, we do what we have to do to fit in. When it doesn't work, we find a new group, do the same thing. So now we keep disguising who we are, putting layers and layers and layers on it just to fit in. And it takes stripping those layers away. It takes stripping away all that falsehood, all that bravado we put together to get acceptance. Because when we peel all those layers off that onion and get down to that core of it, do you know what's at that core? It's ourselves. And that's the only layer of that onion that matters. When we actually get down to who we are, then we can start really working on our change. And again, it's painful. It sucks because, like I said, a lot of us have acceptance and rejection issues. And dealing with that and stripping that away, yeah, it opens up a few old wounds. But as I've said for the last couple of weeks, we have to go through the fire. We have to feel the pain. We have to feel the shame. We have to get past the denial. And we have to discover who we were so we can discover who we're going to be. And then when we discover who we're going to be, we can build on that and become who we are now and strive to be our ideal of our perfect self. Which, when I first started this, my ideal of my perfect self has evolved so much. I mean, it's incredible. And I've reached so many milestones on a personal level, just striving to change. I can get up in the morning, go look in the mirror, and actually smile at myself. Actually see somebody there that I love, somebody that I like. But that doesn't come by sitting there and hiding behind all these masks, all these layers of this onion that's really all they do is sting. I mean, yeah, we go out on the yard, we have to act tough, we can't show weakness, we can't do any of this, we have to do what the homeboys want, we have to do this and this and this to fit in. Sometimes we have to let that go. We have to say, hey, you know what? I got to think about me and my future. I've got to think about my family, my kids, my parents. I have people counting on me to get out so I can be a part of this world. And I'm not doing that sitting here with you guys, playing pinochle, shooting the shit and getting in trouble. That just doesn't cut it. I have to start going my own way. And that's where we get back to that choice of free will. This change I went through, it was not easy. I mean, when I say that if I can make the change that I've made, anybody can do it, I'm not exaggerating. I'm not trying to make people feel better. When I came into prison, I was so angry, so disillusioned with life. I was bitter. I blamed my victim for everything that had happened. I blamed him for me being in prison. And all I wanted to do was lash out and hurt people because it made me feel better. I wallowed in my gambling addiction. I, tried to fit in everywhere I could. I, in my past, even partook in violence for these groups. Been in a riot because of these groups. And I was so lost. Imagine being out in the middle of the ocean and there's not land in sight and the clouds are so thick overhead you can't even see the sun. That's what I felt like. just floating aimlessly in this bitter sea. And it made me a very hard, very angry, very quick to strike person. There was no forgiveness in my heart, no kindness. I'd given up hope. And it really, in the end, it took the concern of one person just to sit down and tell it to me straight. And it started me on my change. But I had to, figure out who I was. I had to ask for help. We talked about the steps a while back. Step one, asking for help. That's as important in the changing ourselves for the better, as any other step. Without that, the old guy named Tex, remember him well. Without him showing just a little kindness and telling me it was okay to ask for help, I don't think I ever would have. I don't know where I would be right now if I hadn't experienced compassion and experienced that moment of vulnerability of asking for help. So yeah, if I can do this, there's not a person in a prison cell anywhere that can't do this if they actually apply themselves. I don't care who they are. But it's not going to come free, it's not going to come painless, and it's not going to be easy. But for the life of me, I would not have it any other way, because it has been worth every step of this journey to find who I truly am. So I'll give it back to you guys for a minute.
That was fantastic, Michael. Wow. And you said so much right there.
And, another thing that we forget is, Mike read that book. He used your book. So, a lot of it was really good, really, really helpful for him. I wanted to, do you have anything to add, Joe?
Yeah. You know what? I can observe and write all I want, but Michael made it real there. It's real. It's not easy. It's painful, but it's necessary. And at the end, all the sacrifice, whatever it costs, all the gratification you give up, it's all worth it. And if you want your freedom, you got to do it. I love his analogy of being on the ocean. And if I could just add to what he said, it's like you can be in a lifeboat on the ocean and give up hope and just drift aimlessly. But if you set landfall as a goal, and with whatever you have to use, I mean, obviously you're probably not going to have a cell phone out there in the lifeboat, but position of the stars, anything you might see in a distance, whatever you have at that time, that's what you use, and you do everything you can to hit land. And that's what the idea, like by way of analogy, Michael just described perfectly. And he made it real. It's not just some theoretical concept in a book. He lived it. He lived it, and he made the change. And that's what it's all about.
Well, should we wrap it up? I wanted to motivate Joe to dig into the Course in Miracles. He said he was interested. I've been trying to dig into, I've been dedicating myself every day. I'm on lesson 23. It gets easier as you go. I use, I get help a lot from other podcasts and stuff, but I thought it'd be fun maybe to match A Course in Miracles concept to Joe's bullet points from the chapter. What do you think? Are you game?
Yeah, for me, that's going to be a big commitment, and
No,
I got to
no,
get out of the,
I mean,
get
like,
out of the contemplation stage and into the
oh,
action
no,
stage.
no. I was thinking like right today,
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
A lot of, because the more I read this book, and one of the reasons I started reading this book is I'm always reading books looking for ways, looking for books that I can recommend to my clients if they're struggling with change, if they're struggling with just, you talk about this in your book, Joe, just getting started. It's like, I am this flawed individual. Number one, I can't admit that I'm flawed. So that's a big deal. And I think that would be really powerful for somebody who's just stuck. They're not going to the groups. They're in the gangs, or they're not in the gangs. Maybe they're just in their addiction. Maybe they're just stuck. And that's what the Course in Miracles would call your ego. Your ego constantly, so you have a mind, and the mind well, I'm probably going to screw this up. It's kind of complicated, but your mind is not necessarily the ego. The mind can absorb like knowledge, and knowledge is, again, another complicated subject in the Course in Miracles, but it all fleshes itself out. I just haven't talked about it enough. But it's our ego, the ego, who is not us. The Course in Miracles teaches us that's not us. And when we react, and when we defend, and when we attack, that's not our true nature. Our true nature was who we were when we were conceived, actually, not born, even conceived. And that is a pure innocent being connected to God, source, whatever you want. And there's no religion that's outside of it, even though it does focus a lot on Christianity and Jesus was a very powerful messenger. But it kind of it unpacks some of the misinterpretations and the mischaracterizations and the misapprehension of what's stated in the Bible, and maybe what was manipulated after the fact in the Bible. But so much of this relates to the Course in Miracles, Joe's book in particular, and just the journey of rehabilitation. I think, I'm starting to think that it may be just the foundational work that someone would need to do. So the Course in Miracles talks a lot about miracles. It's shifting your perception from and the Course uses a lot of words that we use in English language that aren't exactly what they sound like. So if you use the word fear versus love, it's like those two words are so broad, but actually in the Bible, the word love was translated from the word charity in Greek or Hebrew or whatever it was. Kind of going off on a tangent, but I just think this book and this chapter made me think that it's so applicable. So miracles are shifting your perception, that when you have a miracle, it means you finally see that we are not separate from God, and we are not separate from each other. And thus we should stop attacking each other on many, many fronts. So we should stop judging, criticizing, defending, calling out, lashing out, and doing all these different things that a lot of my clients talk about doing, participating for the sake of participation. That would be considered an illusion of the ego. The ego tricks us to doing all this stuff. And so, like, be open to change. And so the ACM, the A Course in Miracles, says that miracles are our natural inherent God-given who we really are, and that we approach everybody with the fact that we're not separate. You are me. If you're attacking me, it's because I have attacked you or someone else. So, and the other concept that Joe brought up was stop making excuses. And the Course in Miracles says that only you and you alone are responsible for what you see. And the Course in Miracles talks about this perception. We just see it through false eyes. So it says that we're all creating our reality through our thoughts and choices. And again, a lot of our clients talk about, and Michael knows this, when I changed my thoughts, I was able to change my actions, and then I was able to get on a positive trajectory on that. And again, stop making excuses for and blaming, right? And dealing with rejection positively. Again, that is a super related concept to the Course in Miracles, because they have this weird expressions in the Course in Miracles, but it's nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists, and herein lies the peace of God. So it's like all that's just fake. That's just part of the dream. That's just part of the illusion. Our true self is in the spirit of love and forgiveness of others, because they just haven't recognized that yet. They're just in a dream about their negativity. And the ego loves for us to stay where it's at. It loves for us to constantly engage and do battle and, stay where we're at, never change, say that, we've done nothing wrong or whatever it is that we do, in particular, our clients. I think the ego is our false self. The real self is the one that Michael just finished talking about, the person that he sees today in the mirror and says, I like myself. I didn't like myself, the person I was who came to prison. And that's why I went to prison, because I didn't like myself. I wasn't able to get out of my own way, like this is talking about. And to thine own self be true. We've all heard that many times, but that's also a big Course in Miracles concept. And the Course in Miracles does emphasize authenticity and trying to align our actions with who we really are, which is supposed to be based in love and truth, not our perception of the truth, not our version of the truth, but the truth. And so, and again, the Course in Miracles talks about, well, in a roundabout way, but the removing the masks. It's the removing the mask of the ego. The ego is there and came up when you understand your shadow, I think it's shadow work or whatever, where it says, look, we all suffered traumas as a child. We all do. I don't know. There might be a couple of Leave It to Beaver families, but I don't think so. And those childhood traumas, the Course in Miracles actually does say we have to tackle head on, and just to try to dismiss them away by, some spiritual bypassing, just saying, oh, it doesn't exist. Everything's love and light. But ultimately you haven't, all you've done is just put like a Band-Aid over a gaping wound. It's just never going to hold. It's just never, it doesn't hold. And so you miss out on something. You miss out on something when you don't examine, okay, why are all these past traumas that I've gone through, how do they manifest itself? Well, they manifest itself in projection, the projection onto other people. And no matter what happens, if you're attacking me, it's because in my childhood, there was something about that that's familiar. And so then I've attracted that to myself. And then if I attack you back in whatever words, through words or deeds or being neglectful of each other, lack of self-care, or whatever that word is, because the Course in Miracles uses a word and it means like a million things, but it just says, and if you're attacking me, it's my fault, because I'm still viewing the world as separate. And remember, your thoughts create your reality. So if I'm dealing with someone who's just a client, even they're just coming at me in a negative way in whatever manner, or if I misperceive it or they are doing it, how I react to it is my responsibility, which again is part of Joe's book, Dealing with Rejection. Rejection, I think Joe means that in a pretty broad sense too. Just don't take things personally. Some things don't always go your way. You don't always get what you're entitled to. So I don't know. I ended this today because I am seriously thinking about, I don't know, somehow creating something for my clients so that they could get this Course in Miracles, because I think it would be so empowering. And that word is hard for me, but to empower them to just first, you've got to get your ego in check before anything else happens. And I did just recommend this to a client. He took a waiver and he's going to do a year. He's going to work through the lessons because it's 365 lessons.
Wow.
And then another 234 little small things, but each lesson is just a little bit. And so it builds 5 minutes of text, a few minutes for the lesson, which you do only 1 minute up front. You just start out, but then you start to slowly understand this, but it doesn't take hold. But I think it would be such a solid foundation for everybody to really work with if they could get past the egos talking about, oh, this is too religious or whatever. Again, that's just your ego not wanting you to change. It does not want you to see the truth. It does not want you to be the light. You know what Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. It doesn't want that. And that's what Jesus's teaching was all about. And so anyway, the miracles, when you can perceive something as it's meant to be, it can give you that opportunity for learning and growth. And I guess I speak to the loved ones, but anybody else who listens to this show through the week, we're a couple dozen people that listen through the week, and becoming immersed in self-help. I just think this is such a nice springboard because it can really help you to do the shadow work, which is a Jungian concept, but it is related to the Course in Miracles. I did realize that. And that's another reason why I really I'm like, okay, this book, it resonates with me because I know there is a deep connection to childhood wounds and the things that we keep replaying over and over and over in our life. And just to sort of spiritually bypass over it and say it doesn't exist, it doesn't help. It just doesn't help. You're going to have to address those childhood wounds. And I just thought as well for our clients, a lot of things I learned this week about shadow work is I found these 2 great books because the commissioners are always asking about trauma. Have you dealt with your trauma? Have you dealt with it? And then my clients will say, yeah, I've forgiven them. It's like, no, that's spiritual bypassing. Have you worked on your trauma? And the way you do that without the use of psychedelics is the work, the shadow work, and understanding the dark night of the soul and all that stuff, and going, okay, my dad was, criticized me, or I always got passed over. My mom always let my brother get first dibs at the popsicle, and he always took the red one. That actually could be a traumatizing event for a child. And then you attract a partner in your life that makes you second fiddle or whatever it is. Or it could be really bad trauma, which is the most of our clients is really bad trauma, beating and other kinds of abuse and things like that, bullying, and yikes, like so much stuff, right? And all of that plays out. And that's why that very superficial, not superficial, it's just simple, the simple hurt people. It's across the board. It's physiological. It's proven. I hate to use the word scientific because the people on the media ruin science. They don't know what science is, but I went off on a rant. It's 11:03. It's my job to cut you guys loose so you can get on your day. But if you have any closing thoughts, Joe, Mike, go for it.
All right, mine's going to be real quick. So one thing that I've heard over the years, and I've said it myself, is it's just not fair. Life's not fair. This isn't fair. That's not fair. Well, guess what, people? Be glad that life is not fair. Because most of us, if we actually got what we had coming, we would be in a lot worse place than we are now. So keep that in mind.
Joe?
Well, you guys have pretty much said it all. All I want to say is that it's not easy, but go out and start wherever you're at, and do a little bit more every day, and the cumulative effect hopefully will create a huge change. And that's what it's all about.
It's so great too when you make big changes in your life too, and you can say, you know, a few years ago I might have done that, or a few years ago I might have done that. And then be able to say, okay, I slipped up and I did what I did before 20 years. I'm the same 20-year-old. I'm the same 12-year-old. And to be able to say, okay, I forgive you for that. Get back up, get going. You can do, you can just get back up and try again. And the effort, and like Joe says, just keep making the effort. In his book over and over, he says that in one way or another. So thank you so much for everybody who listens. Thank you for the both of you for coming. Next week, I might have another successful client who just getting released. He promised to come on. I don't expect him to, and I'm not holding him to that. He's got, they got family, and you want to visit, you want to all this stuff. But he is planning to come on. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. But he's another guy that really gets it and has been like Mike, a facilitator and things like that. So really trying to bring on positive people to the show for families to hear that, possible, instead of this, like, they don't let anybody out, or, they'll never let me out, or anything like that, to say where some of my clients have come from to where they are today, sitting with Joe and I, because Joe's been on here with many different clients as well throughout the course of the podcast, here and there. And then I started out with two really great guys as well. So that's it. I don't know. Just went off talking. I guess the tea kicked in or something.
The wonders of caffeine.
A little. It's only a little. It's green tea. It's like a smidge of caffeine. But okay, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
And we'll see you soon. I'll talk to Joe later, probably, for sure. And next
Right.
week. Next week. Strategy 11, create good karma. Wait a second. Wait a second. That one could be good. I like this too, because Joe understands karma. So we'll see you later. Happy Sunday.
All right, guys.
You too.
Take care.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right.